Oh, good evening, everyone. Welcome and Happy New Year. I love starting off the year with this national annual virtual event, and we're so glad that you could join us tonight. Before we begin, I wanted to acknowledge on behalf of our team and all the CF family, all the CF families and others affected by the California fires. And just know that we're keeping you in our thoughts and our prayers. Um, Now some positive news for the year, and that is on the science front. I'm so pleased that 2025 is already off to a great start. As you are almost certainly aware, right before the December holidays, the FDA made two announcements, which were giant wins for our community. So first of all, the FDA announced that the approval of 94 additional rare mutations for Trikafta. And these had not been previously approved for any CFTR modulator. And this means that there are now a total of 271 mutations besides F508del that can take Trikafta. And one of the 94 newly approved mutations include N1303K, the fifth most common mutation in people with CF in the United States. So we're going to have a great time tonight, sort of talking a lot about this. We have lots of people to be able to fill in all these different things, but that this was some really happy news, obviously, to start the year off. And I want to give a special shout out to Martin Mentz and his team at the CFF lab, who was one of the first people to recognize that Trikafta could potentially help those who have an N1303K mutation. And this led to subsequent trials, including a large one funded by the CF Foundation, which really proved that benefit. The second announcement from the FDA made that same Friday afternoon before the holidays was the approval of the next version of Trikafta in some ways. And this is the new triple combination modulator therapy, Alyftrek, for people with CF ages 6 and older who have CFTR mutations that are approved for Trikafta. So if you're eligible for Trikafta, it's also eligible for Alyftrek, but also 31 other mutations that had never previously been approved before. So some additional people able to benefit. And, we'll talk a lot about this tonight, but the main difference with this new therapy is that it's only taken once a day. And it may be a little bit more effective than Trikafta based on maybe a little bit larger effect on sweat chloride in clinical trials. And we're also hopeful that those who've had side effects from Trikafta may be able to better tolerate Alyftrek, but that's something each person is going to have to determine with their own care team in the upcoming months. But the bottom line is, as we head into 2025, I think these developments just speak to the incredible scientific progress we continue to make together, and hopefully shows just how dedicated we remain to developing therapies for all people with CF. I'm just going to say, as we head into tonight, that these exciting milestones would not be possible without you. So thank you. I especially want to thank our generous corporate supporters, companies that make so much of this progress possible. So we have a really exciting program ahead. I've invited many of our leaders from across the foundation to be on hand, and we want to take a lot of time to take your questions. So we're going to spend less time talking at you and more time really hopefully answering the questions, and use this as a way to highlight the progress we're making in cure, care, and community. So when the Q&A time comes, we'll provide clear guidance on how to submit your questions. Start thinking about those now. And then as we move through the evening, I'm pleased to share that we have a great member of our team, Laurent Quinaud, who's going to moderate our chat. We're going to put links into the chat to provide more information for you. So follow along with that. Now, before we get into those questions, I want to share a brief glimpse into our scientific and our care priorities as we head into 2025. And then following this introduction from me, our uber-talented Chief Operating and Financial Officer, Irena Barisic, is going to highlight some of the many ways the CF community continues to help drive our mission forward. And she'll also discuss our plans to best position the foundation for the future. So let's talk about that first C, cure. And as some of you probably know, each year I choose a word for our organization to help guide our efforts in pushing the CF mission forward, especially around the science, and a word that really unites us and hopefully inspires us. And in 2025, the word we're using to guide us is focus. Focus. And when we say this, we mean being focused on and putting our energy and resources into the work which will make and have the greatest impact for people with CF and their families. And that means work to make sure that all people with CF, no matter what mutations they have, will have a transformative therapy to treat the underlying cause of their CF. It's work to make sure we develop new therapies and support people with CF to take on the challenges that they still face today. and of course, work which will eventually lead to our ultimate goal, that is a cure for cystic fibrosis. Now, how are we going to do this? Well, focus is what those who first founded the CF Foundation 70 years ago had, and then we're going to continue to have that focus to carry that torch forward as we ambitiously pursue the most complicated CF science yet, and that's genetic therapies. And we know that genetic therapies hold incredible promise, right, for all people with CF, no matter what mutations they have. And in many ways, this is really at the vanguard of medicine. I'm pleased to share that we are pioneering science in both RNA and DNA therapies, which have moved past testing in the laboratory, are now being tested in 6 different early phase clinical trials. So more on that ahead tonight. Additional work's going on in gene editing, which is still only in the lab, but continues to progress. We're really excited about this research. We know that it is so important. It's critical for us to get this right. We know it's going to take some time, but we know that this will eventually form the basis for a cure for CF as well. So we're going to discuss tonight as well how the foundation is supporting the development of the next generation of modulator therapies beyond Trikafta and Alyftrek. Already talking about the next thing, and we're eventually convinced that these future drugs are going to make Trikafta and Alyftrek feel like yesterday's drugs. That's what we're working towards. And to lead that scientific discussion tonight, our Chief Scientific Officer, Steve Rowe, is here to share some specifics. And of course, as we work to the future, we always keep in mind the challenges and complications that people with CF confront right now. So that can mean GI issues, it can mean CF-related diabetes, it can mean mental health, infection. And the foundation is supporting many clinical trials globally and studies to address these priorities and more. So excited that our Senior Vice President of Clinical Research and Clinical Trials, JP Clancy, is going to speak with us tonight about the highly innovative CF research taking place in clinical trials around the world. And while those clinical trials are essential to making progress, we know that oftentimes it's working well with your care team that makes the biggest difference for the CF challenges. So excited that Dr. Al Farrow, our new Chief Medical Officer, who is focused on ensuring the best CF clinical care delivery in the years ahead, is with us tonight, as well as Mary Dwight, our Senior VP and Chief Advocacy and Policy Officer, who's always working to make sure that people with CF have access to that best care. And lastly, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the CF Foundation partnered with leading CF caregivers from around the country in 2024 to publish 2 position papers on CF care teams and the CF care model in the Journal of Cystic Fibrosis. And the papers highlight new CF clinical care guidance, including the recommended frequency of clinic visits, encouraging care teams to tailor that visit frequency to the unique experience of each person with CF. And we want to make sure that we talk about that tonight. Dr. Whitney Brown on the clinical affairs team is going to be ready to talk to us more about that. So this is just a quick glimpse into the work we're focusing on in 2025 and what we call those first 2 C's, cure and care, right? But before we dive into the details on cure and care and go into questions, I want to invite someone known for her heart for our 3rd C, and that the community, to talk to us, and that is Irena Barisic, our Chief Operating and Chief Financial Officer. So Irena is now entering her 5th year with the foundation. She leads the development of our financial strategy, oversees our operations and the field and fundraising teams, and really is providing strategic guidance to ensure that our community efforts are integrated and successful and designed to have the most impact, a true visionary leader for us. And Irena is going to talk to you about some of the key strategy projects for us for this year. And I've also asked her to speak candidly, wearing her Chief Financial Officer hat, about our long-term financial plan, something we've been working hard on over the last 12 months. So Irena, if you could join us, that would be great. All right, yeah, take it away. Welcome.
All right. Thank you, Mike, for that very generous introduction. Good evening, all. It's so wonderful to be with all of you. I want to start off by thanking each of you for joining us this evening, and of course for your dedication to people with CF throughout the year. I'm so pleased to have this chance to share a few insights on how our team is working alongside and in support of this amazing CF community. Our strong partnership with the community has driven our progress since the foundation's earliest days and really remains essential to achieving the ambitious goals that Mike just talked about. So A major undertaking at the foundation this year is the development of our next 5-year strategic plan, which will lay out our priorities and will also guide our work for the years ahead. In our last strategic plan, we established the cure, care, and community framework that you hear about so frequently from us. And this plan has also moved us forward in the areas of developing therapies for all people with CF, no matter what mutations they have, continuing to support access to best clinical care, and engaging and supporting the CF community, particularly the ever-growing number of adults with CF. As we build this next plan, we are working hard and will be very intentional to integrate your voice, the voice of the CF community. We want to be sure that our next long-term plan addresses your biggest and most pressing needs and priorities. And to begin gathering your input, this fall we introduced a survey to gain insight on what is important to you, and we are now assessing the responses from the nearly 2,000 people who participated. And with the initial review of the survey results, one thing that is clear so far is that the areas that are of highest priority to you are driving progress in research and high quality care. And these priorities align very well with the areas that we have been prioritizing at the foundation. A few other specific areas from the survey that stand out so far are the importance of making meaningful progress in genetic therapies, the desire for help with the challenges that people with CF continue to face even when on Trikafta, and the strong recognition of the need to continue to effectively fundraise to support our ambitious goals. So thank you to all of you who provided very thoughtful input. We will be reflecting on and incorporating that input as we work this year to develop our next 5-year plan. And your input is especially helpful because we know that we need to identify and put our resources and energy into the highest priority areas to ensure that we continue our story of remarkable progress. Now, of course, in addition to the survey, we continue to hear from you throughout the year through other available channels, such as Community Voice. And this year marks the 10th anniversary of Community Voice. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, this is a group of CF Foundation community advisors that any individual with CF or their family can join. And over the past years, our membership has grown from 240 to 2,100 people who have brought their voice to more than 500 projects, informing every area of our mission, from research priorities, clinical care guidelines, to national events like ResearchCon and other virtual gatherings for people with CF. So if you are interested in joining, please check out the link in the chat. We also know that many of our most fruitful, innovative, and long-lasting collaborations take place at the chapter level. We have begun very intentional work to ensure that we position our field colleagues well to provide the CF community with the most meaningful support locally for decades to come. Tonight, however, I'd like to take a moment to celebrate our 2024 Chapter Award winners nationwide and thank them for their dedication and service to people with CF. You all will see the link to the full list of awardees in the chat. So congratulations and thank you all award winners. We are so incredibly grateful for your work and for your passion for the CF mission. All right, and finally, as Mike mentioned, in my role as Chief Operating and Financial Officer of the Foundation, I do want to give you more insight into our finances this evening. We have developed a comprehensive financial strategy to guide us in the years ahead. This strategy really is a roadmap that shows what we need to do to best drive our mission forward. As we focus more on genetic technologies, it is increasingly clear that the cost of new research is rising, and the size of our investment to achieve a cure will be significant. In fact, even greater than we initially estimated 5 years ago. The goal of our financial strategy is to help us strike that right balance of investing heavily in research today while also preserving the resources we will need in the future to complete our mission. And for us, this means absolutely having ambitious plans for driving progress now. In fact, we anticipate spending $2 billion through 2030 to drive progress in research and care. At the same time, we know from our financial modeling that we need to take bold action to control our overall spending and to ensure that we continue to concentrate our spending on highest impact priorities. It's also very clear from our financial modeling that fundraising remains critical to achieving our goals. We are going to need to raise about $100 million a year to aggressively pursue all of our cure and care goals in the years ahead. Now, we are working now to position our chapters and to lift our fundraising strategy to be successful at that. While we are on the topic of fundraising, I'm so pleased to share that through the major giving campaign, Milestones 3, Driven by a Dream, we are getting very close to crossing the finish line and meeting our $200 million goal. We have been working on this campaign for the last few years, and I want to thank you all for what you have been doing to contribute to this success. I am also very grateful for the leadership of our Milestones campaign co-chairs, Kate O'Donnell and Amy Berry, and our Milestones ambassadors, Bob and Kate Niehaus, and John and Amy Weinberg. Congratulations all. This is an incredible accomplishment. A little more to go, and we will absolutely get there. So based on what you have heard from Mike and from me, I hope this helps explain why I am so excited about what lies ahead and why I'm absolutely confident that we will continue the remarkable story of transforming the lives of people with CF. Thank you so very much for your partnership in this. Thank you for your support, and thank you so much for your dedication to our shared mission. And with that, Mike, I'll turn it back to you now.
That's great. Well, thank you, Irena. That's a great mix of talking about strategy, but also some of the reality, right, of what we're going to need to be thinking about financially to ensure that we're really successful in delivering on that strategy. So thank you. Now it's time for what you've been waiting for, and that is a chance to hear from you and to take questions and answers. We had some people who've already submitted questions ahead of time. So we're going to try to get to everybody's, although there's a lot. So I can't promise we'll get everyone. We're going to try. If you have a question, please use the Q&A function on the bottom of your toolbar, not the chat. The chat's for fun. The Q&A is for questions. And let's start off with one that we was submitted beforehand, and it was actually directed to Steve Rowe, and that is about genetic-based therapies. And Steve, I'm going to ask you to come on and just to talk about the answer to this question, which was, what science in genetic therapies are you really excited about now? Something that's sort of coming soon in the upcoming months. What are we learning? What do you see ahead for this?
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and we're really glad to take this question. Always a good one to start off with, and it's always hard to pick when we're doing so much because we're active in so many areas. We'll talk a bit today about new approaches in anti-infectives, new approaches with antimicrobials for people with resistant infections like mycobacteria, and new partnerships that we're building to advance anti-inflammatory therapies in new ways by combining with other diseases. All these are really, really exciting, on top of this incredible news that you've already shared about the approval of yet another CFTR modulator that helps even more people with CF. But as we think about your main question, which was the path to a cure, what are we doing in the genetic therapy space? We're obviously tremendously excited about this and spend a lot of our time thinking about it, because it's that uncharted territory that requires so much energy. And we know it's going to require a few different strategies to try and get there eventually before we find the ultimate cure. A few of those rise to the top. One is mRNA therapies. And we have 3 different approaches all now in the clinic. So it's a big, big year to imagine that 3 different trials ongoing for mRNA therapy for the lung that are happening. That includes partners with Vertex and Moderna, partners with Arcturus, and partners with another company called Recode. And all are enrolling, and it's too early to say about any results because we're just at that earliest stage. But one of the reasons that we're super excited about this is that this helps people with CF regardless of their mutation. Now, currently, the enrollment includes people that can't benefit from CFTR modulators, but we hope that one day this could also apply to people on modulators or that are getting not quite enough help from their modulator therapy. And so this provides a tremendous hope for those individuals that we know is so urgent right now. Also, not only does it have the potential to hold off advancing lung disease if this works like we hope and like we expect it can from the sorts of testing that's been done beforehand. It is also going to teach us if we can deliver a gene. And so when we move to the ultimate destination of trying to deliver a cure for people with CF, we know the sorts of particles that are delivering this mRNA therapy also have the potential to deliver gene editors that would deliver a cure. So that's one big category that we're excited about and paying very close attention to. Another would be to our approaches to deliver gene therapy by a gene addition approach. And we've got several of those all ongoing right now as well. Our partners at 4DMT are the furthest along, but there's also programs from Crystal Bio and Spirevent that are active in the TDN that are all enrolling people with CF now to test gene therapy by gene addition. We've learned from that early experience from 4DMT that you can start to get protein expression. You can start to get the CFTR expression that we're looking for if this is to work as intended. And now we're enrolling more people to see if clinical benefit occurs. This is obviously at the forefront of genetic therapy and doing so in the lungs to try and help people with CF. So we're quite excited about that. And then finally, again, we spend a lot of time thinking about gene editing. Why gene editing? Because this will represent the destination for a cure for cystic fibrosis. And we've got a couple that we've announced in the last year that we're working on and really rolling up our sleeves with our partners. We have several different things that we're doing. Can't talk about all of them, but two that I'm really excited about. One is a partnership with Prime Medicines that was formed by a company of one of the discoverers of CRISPR, which allows gene editing to occur. Another is also our partners at Recode, which have gene editing technology. We're working now very intensely in the lab with these two groups to pave the way for genetic therapy of the lung to try and fix the native gene. It's our greatest hope for a permanent cure. It's our greatest hope for a treatment that could result in a one-time cure. And it's really a harbinger of some of the early work that we're doing now with those companies is a harbinger for the sorts of permanent cures that we can envision that might follow. Even if we're starting in the lung with some of those intents, if it begins to work there, you can start to imagine fixing the gene everywhere that would follow. And so all that remains extremely exciting for us. It's going to be a big year.
So Steve, thank you. There's lots of things you're excited by, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you maybe one follow-up question is, I know people are following the RNA story very closely, right? Because it's what in terms of the time frame when we might start to see some results from these different trials. I know there's no guarantees there, but just in general, what type of time frame are we talking about?
Yeah, each of these are really carefully controlled. They stage the testing so that you start with a really low dose, you do it in a handful of people, and then you advance to the next dose. This is why it's so important that we partner with the CF community. A lot of you are listening might be considering participating in a trial like that, and that's why we need you. We know people with CF will step up to the cause. How long is it going to take? I think it's going to take about 12 months before we really start to know. It's always hard to predict because we don't know how fast these trials occur. If exciting results start to emerge, we may get something sooner. More likely, we'll have to do stepwise testing to get up to those higher doses before we really see a benefit. And that's why we have to be careful to see how well it goes and how fast people enroll and how fast the data start to roll in.
Yeah.
I can tell you one thing that's for sure is unlike small molecules, you really look at every single patient one at a time to make sure things are going well. So that is both the good news and the bad news. The good news is we're having to be really, really careful. Bad news, it takes a little bit longer to do that well.
Well, still exciting that in the upcoming year, we're gonna actually starting to be seeing some results. So Steve, don't go too far. I'm sure we're gonna need you back. I'm actually the next one up here is actually for Mary Dwight. And Mary, I'm gonna ask if you could come on. And the question in particular was about the new federal administration beginning, already lots of activities in the first 2 days. What are we thinking on the foundation's sort of top advocacy priorities? How are we preparing? I know you're always thinking ahead, Mary. What are we doing?
Sure, Mike. I know this is on a lot of people's minds, especially this week, right? We're at the start of a new Congress, a new administration just sworn in on Monday. And really, I think it's a balance, right? Our advocacy remains the same, always, to advance the mission of the foundation, which is towards a cure for CF, all those amazing things that Steve just highlighted, and a care for everybody with CF. But certainly the political landscape for our issues is shifting with this new administration and a new Congress. So what are we expecting? Our work is really going to be a combination of continuing to advance our bipartisan priorities, things like the PASTOR Act and the Help All Copays Act to help affordability of drugs, something I know many of the people on the call tonight have been advocating for a while now. But also we are keeping an eye on some new emerging issues, things that we haven't had to tackle for several years. And some of the things that are top of our mind are protecting science and really watching budgets as some key agencies that are critically important to the CF story and success, like the NIH and the FDA, are coming under question. And as I mentioned earlier, we, of course, will always be vigilant in our work to protect quality, affordable, specialized care for people with CF and oppose any problematic changes related to the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid. So let me dive in just briefly to a few of those. So some of the first things out of the box, always in a new Congress, is budget. And we've seen that in early days this month. Early initial thinking about spending, federal spending is coming out. And we're watching really closely because the impact of this debate, it does have effects on our ability to advance our mission as fast as we want to. Top of mind there is science and drug development. We've certainly heard some increasing skepticism towards science and public health from Capitol Hill. And there are definitely potential for significant ramifications for some of these key agencies that oversee areas that are important to us, and their funding, how they function. The NIH and the FDA are both essential, vital, and strong partners for us in our effort to find a cure and to develop more and better therapies for everyone with cystic fibrosis. And we've really been watching, again, the budget proposals there. Because we know how essential they have been to the success of the CF story and how vital they are in what we need to do moving forward. So I think one of our jobs here specifically in the CF community is to tell that story, right? We have a wonderful, amazing story of what science can produce and also what we need from science. And so I really want to encourage everyone to gear up their stories there. It's going to be important for us to keep sharing that and making sure that the Hill hears how important science is and funding. Again, another critical thing always on our agenda is coverage and access and affordability for CF care. It remains at the heart of our work, at the heart of our advocacy agenda. And some things that we're watching really closely are things like Medicaid. I think many of you on the call have heard me say Medicaid is really a vital safety net for people with cystic fibrosis. More than half of all children with cystic fibrosis benefit from Medicaid in some way, and about a third of all adults. So really, really important program. And we know there are going to be some policy proposals that will reduce support for Medicaid. So we're going to be watching that closely. And again, telling the story, the successful story of how programs like Medicaid really ensure that everybody with cystic fibrosis gets the high quality specialty care that they need. Another thing I know is on many of your minds, because a lot of you have reached out to me and my team about it, is the Affordable Care Act and what do we expect? I would say at the very top line here, at this point, I don't have a crystal ball, but at this point, we do not expect whole hog efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act. What we do expect to see is some attempts to reform the Affordable Care Act and some of the policy proposals that emerged about 4 years ago on things that would expand short-term limited duration health plans, which we know can undercut the more robust insurance plans that people with CF require and cause those more robust plans to cost more. We think we may see some attempts to create separate risk pools for marketplace enrollees. Marketplace has become a really important source of insurance coverage for a lot of people with cystic fibrosis. And those separate risk pools could risk increased premiums for people who live with a chronic illness like CF. So we oppose those and will do so if those proposals surface. And we're also going to see a debate about whether we should continue advanced premium tax credits. Those have been an important way to make affordable plans more available. So I think I want to really emphasize that we know how important the Affordable Care Act has been for people with CF, and we will remain steadfast in making sure that it remains the robust program that we need. So how can you help? Again, I said get your science stories ready. That's definitely going to be a focus of our early day advocacy in the next coming months. But I hope all of you join us. And I know so many of you on this call already do. And thank you for your time and for sharing your stories. They're so essential to our effective advocacy. And encourage people to join us too. You can always text FIGHT CF, all one word, FIGHT CF, to 96387 to make sure you get the most recent up-to-date advocacy messages and calls to action. Your stories are really, again, the heart of our advocacy efforts. They're why CF is so well known on Capitol Hill as an amazing story and a shining example of what we can do. So thank you and keep at it. We need your voices. Thanks, Mike.
Mary, thank you. And what I can say for sure is that Mary and her team are on it. Within 24, actually less than 24 hours, it was more like 6 hours after the election came in. And as we started to think ahead, I've heard from Mary and her team almost every day of saying, hey, we've been monitoring this. This is what we think we need to do. So Mary, keep up the good work. I know your team has been burning the midnight oil on this. Let's switch now, because I think there's been a lot of questions that have come in about the new modulator Alyftrek. And I want to invite Dr. Al Farrow, our Chief Medical Officer, to come on. And Al, I'm going to maybe prep you with a couple of questions, and you can take those. But I think one of the things that people are particularly asking about is, I'm on Trikafta. Should I switch? Should I switch to Alyftrek? What would guide me on that? And then a couple of the questions about side effects. What do we know about those? Do they appear to be the same? So I probably have one other one for you after that. But if you want to start by maybe talking about what you've been thinking and what kind of advice in general we've been talking to people about.
Absolutely, Mike. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm so glad so many of you are on the call. This has got to be the most frequent question happening in clinics today, right? And in fact, Mike in his clinic is answering these questions. And that's sort of why he's already given us the answer right from the get-go. So let me take a slightly different tack and help us think about what's the information, what are the questions we want to ask of our providers when we're in clinic. And one is, what is the evidence? Is there evidence that shows that one agent is superior to another? And importantly, in CF, what are some of the outcomes we care most about? FEV1, lung function, pulmonary exacerbation, quality of life. So those are the questions you want to be asking. You want to ask about side effects. Are there more side effects, different side effects with one agent versus the other? How accessible is one versus the other at this point? And importantly, you and your care providers know your history, know your health status, know what works for you and what doesn't. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations. So we're very fortunate in that we have data. In fact, there were over 1,000 patients enrolled in these trials looking at Alyftrek. And from that data, what we can see overall in this population of patients, again, it doesn't speak to an individual, but in this population of patients, there doesn't seem to be a big difference, a significant difference in lung function, in pulmonary exacerbation. There is, as Mike pointed out at the very beginning, a difference in sweat chloride values. What that translates to clinically over a longer term, we really don't know yet. But that was one clear difference. The other clear difference, it is a once-a-day drug, as Mike alluded to, as opposed to a twice-a-day drug. In terms of the side effects, again, these are trials that occur over a short period of time in a limited number, even 1,000 patients. But sometimes to see side effects, you need to have tens of thousands of patients. So what we know from the trials, and when compared to Trikafta, is that the side effect profile does not appear to be very different. That doesn't mean that for any given individual that there might not be a difference. So in point in fact, if you were a person or a loved one as a person who has not tolerated Trikafta, may very well tolerate Alyftrek. So those are things to think about as you have these conversations with your care teams moving forward.
All right, well, thank you. I'm going to pile on one other question, which is, I think one of the things that came up was just about difference in approach to liver function monitoring. If that's something I think that was recommended, and just maybe talk a little bit about that so people are aware. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
So importantly, actually, the FDA put a black box warning on both Trikafta and Alyftrek. So that just underlines the importance of monitoring liver function testing. And the recommendation for Alyftrek is actually prior to initiation of the therapy to go ahead and check your liver function test to make sure it's within the normal range. And then monthly for the first 6 months, quarterly for the next year, and then on a yearly basis, assuming everything is okay and those values are normal. In a few patients, there can be marked elevations in certain liver function testing. And that's why it is important that even though people are feeling much better on these drugs, it is important to continue to follow with your providers and have these tests done.
Perfect. Well, Dr. Farrow, thank you. I think I'm actually going to maybe direct the next question that's modulator related, but it's to Dr. JP Clancy. JP, if you could pop on here, and that is, so JP, I think one of the things that obviously everybody's been interested in learning a little bit more about is the potential mental health side effects of modulators. And talk to us a little bit about what the foundation is doing to learn about sort of mental health aspects. I know there's some things we need to learn, but we're trying to understand this. So can you give us some more details there?
No, I'd be happy to. And thanks again, Mike, for the opportunity. And it's great to see so many, well, not faces per se, but lots of action in the chat with lots of wonderful members of the community. It's clear that people have reported mental health, a variety of different mental health impacts while on modulators. These could include cognitive effects, possibly anxiety, depression, mental fog, things like this. It's sometimes hard to put it all into one bucket, but the point is there have been a lot of these reports. Haven't been seen necessarily in the controlled trials, but that being said, it's a relatively small group relative to the whole CF population, and the period of observation is pretty short. So we've definitely been paying a lot of attention to this, and a couple of tangible things I wanted to share. One, we put together a group of experts to really help guide some of our research questions around mental health and during this era of modulators. And that group is called PRIME, and it's Prioritizing Research in Mental Health in the Era of Modulators. It includes experts in CF, but also psychiatry, psychology, pharmacology, a variety of different disciplines. And that work has really led to a manuscript that I'll plop in the chat in a minute. It's too much for me to do 3 things at once, but the point is, it provides us sort of a guidance of what types of research that we need to do to really answer this question. And then the other part that I think is really exciting is we're in the kind of the finishing up phases of designing a study that's really going to look at a variety of mental health outcome measures in people who initiate Alyftrek. And that study is called Retrial, and it's really focused for people who have stopped or reduced the dose of Trikafta because of side effects, again, focused primarily on CNS and cognitive ones. But we're also going to look at liver function tests too, because we know that's perhaps a smaller group, but certainly a group that really we need to better understand. And for those people, what we want to do is not necessarily dictate the way that treatment is done, but as people are starting Alyftrek under the guidance of their treating physician, doing some evaluations, doing some cognitive testing, doing some screening for a variety of mental health measures, and also looking at biomarkers in the blood and so forth, just to look and monitor these more carefully. So stay tuned. We hope to be rolling that out over the next 1 to 2 months, but hopefully this will be translated into some really clear understanding of these symptoms that are reported, but are hard for us to know and understand just because of the way they're sort of happen in various places across sort of the spectrum. So I'll plop this in the chat and happy to answer any more questions.
But I was going to say, don't go any blue. Yeah, I have 2 other ones for you to give me. We're going to have to go about 7 hours to get all the questions, so we're going to go fast. One's related to diabetes, the other one's related to GI. And so I think there was a specific question was, hey, my child's been started on Ozempic for blood sugar control. Are there studies to support that? But also, what are we doing in that space? And then maybe on the GI space, what are we doing? What are we doing to try to help on the GI space? So maybe I'll throw those 2 your way, and you can take it however you want.
Run with those as I will. So I guess I'll be happy to start with CF-related diabetes. Those who had the opportunity to see the North American CF conference last year, this was highlighted in the second plenary, and really, appreciation of the impact of CFRD on people with CF and their loved ones is significant. It's arguably it's dramatic. And there's a lot of effort that is going on. We have another work group. I was talking about the PRIME group. This one's called ENDO, which is perhaps not quite as clever of name, but they're focused on endocrine questions in people with CF. And it really is led by a lot of experts in CF-related diabetes specifically. And they're also working with more basic scientists and also people who are facile and other types of diabetes. And this group has really been charging ahead with some really exciting work. One of them is the bionic pancreas study, which is really looking at a closed loop system to manage diabetes. And it's basically the idea is that your glucose monitor talks to your insulin pump and basically is able to provide the insulin that you need in real time, with a much less effort and monitoring done by the care provider. That study started enrollment at the end of 2024, and we hope to have that accomplished relatively soon, somewhere in the span of a year to a year and a half, knock on wood. But we're really hoping that data is going to be able to be used to actually bring to the FDA to perhaps have this on the label of that specific closed loop system. And your question specifically around Ozempic and GLP-1 agonists, again, these are drugs that are transforming healthcare right before our eyes, both, starting with obesity, but also much more than that, in addition to type 2 diabetes, but finding other benefits that are of these drugs. So it's really, we're still in the learning phase. There are some case report studies of using GLP-1 agonists in people with CF. And so I would say that, it's probably a little early to say exactly where it fits in the care paradigm, but it's definitely one that is being evaluated. We are supporting 2 studies right now that are doing this at sort of a single center level. And so hopefully maybe by this time next year, we're back at this at the national annual meeting, I can give you a little bit more updates of some additional control data. Yeah, the last question that I had was around GI and what are we doing in GI? And interestingly, we've had a lot of conversations about this because we recently did a long-term strategic planning survey that was sent out to the CF community and care providers and so forth, and we got 1,500 to 2,000 responses. And what came out of this is just the importance of GI symptoms that continue to be ongoing in CF. And so it's clearly something top of mind about our thoughts and planning for the future. GI is a big topic. GI starts at your mouth, goes all the way down, and has lots of attached organs like your pancreas and your liver, and small intestine, large intestine, stomach, reflux, all these things. So we are trying to get a little better handle on what the nature of those ongoing symptoms are, and keep an eye out for an upcoming survey that's going to be coming out from Community Voice in the not too distant future. But just in terms of other studies ongoing, I will mention 3 that I think I'm excited about. One is called Strong CF, and Strong CF is really trying to understand nutrition and GI outcome measures in people in this new modulator era, and really trying to help to better define what represents sort of healthy nutrition. We're learning that BMI has a lot of gaps and really has some shortcomings as an outcome, as a way to sort of look at somebody's health status. So really looking at different ways to really assess nutrition in people who have normal lung function and more advanced lung disease. That study is nearing completion of enrollment, probably has about 50 more subjects to go, but is really cruising along. Another study that I want to highlight is called NICE CF, which is really focused on understanding the role of stool screening in the care and management of people, adults with CF, and how they should incorporate stool screening into their monitoring for colon cancer. We know that people with CF have much higher incidence of colon and other GI cancers, but we also know that the PrEP for people with CF, all of this, it's no fun, but it's incredibly burdensome for people with CF, and it really is a barrier for getting that screening accomplished. So that study has actually completed enrollment, and we are very excited to hopefully have some results to report at North American CF Conference. And the last one I'll mention too, which is not really a study, but it's really an approach to really helping speed up the development of enzymes. We put together an enzyme working group. It's called the PERT, or Pancreatic Enzyme Replacement Therapy Working Group, who really put together a document that we have shared with some of our sponsors and also with the FDA about sort of ways that we might be able to speed up the development of new enzymes. And I think we all appreciate that pancreatic enzymes today are quite good, but there are some improvements that could be made. There could be some benefits of being able to use some different types of technology, like recombinant proteins, that could be used to potentially make more effective and less lower dose enzymes. So the point is, yes, we're trying to help regulators find an easier, faster path to bring these drugs forward. So Mike, happy to go on and on and on, but I feel like I've been rambling.
No, that was great. That was actually very thorough, and thanks for covering those topics, JP. I'm actually going to maybe invite Dr. Whitney Brown to come on. Thanks, JP. Whitney, there's a couple of questions here about pregnancy, and specifically some people who asked about during their experience with pregnancy, they felt like that there was not a lot of guidance that they were able to get from their OBGYN. And what are we doing in that area? What's the latest? This is a fast moving and a fascinating area, but I know, can you talk to us a little bit about that? And then I have one other question for you when you're done with that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. And it is a great question. And as we've learned over the last several years, more and more adults with CF are interested in having families in a variety of different ways. But even for those individuals who may not know that they're carriers or may not have CF, then we know that there has been interest in pregnancy, and if someone finds out that their baby potentially has CF during pregnancy, in terms of potential treatments, etc. And I just want to start out that this is an area that we continue to learn a lot about, treating pregnant women with modulators, whether they have a full diagnosis of CF or whether carriers of CF and have children with CF. These studies have not been done. So this is really unforged territory and off-label treatment with modulators. But at the same time, we understand the urgency that individuals feel when they're facing a CF diagnosis. So what we're doing to try to support our clinicians and gain more information on these topics is really trying to gather experts across the country, both with experts in CF and then experts in maternal fetal medicine and OBGYN, et cetera, to gather together to really look at the evidence and see what the best guidance is. And so back in November, we held a workshop in Bethesda, gathering experts from around the country to look at what is the data, what are the case reports of in utero treatment of babies diagnosed with CF, that the mothers were being treated with modulators. Again, not FDA approved, but something of course, great interest and urgency. And we're going to see that the results of that meeting are going to be published to start guiding the community on where the potential research gaps are. And there were members from the FDA that were present as well to talk about how do we move forward to ensure that this treatment could be safe and effective. I'll also mention that we have guidance documents that are underway. So these are not full guidelines, but again, these are experts in the field partnering with patients with or adults and parents of kids with CF, coming together and writing reproductive health guidance documents now that are probably going to be published later this year. And this document is going to span a number of different topics to include pregnancy and in vitro fertilization, fertility treatments for men, a number of different topics. And so we'll look forward to sharing that knowledge with the community as well later in the year. And lastly, we continue to try to interest people in getting engaged in CF, endocrinologists, reproductive health specialists through our grant, our career development program, such as Envision, which has historically been for endocrinologists and focused on diabetes. But I'm really happy that we have more and more reproductive health specialists joining that group as well as we investigate some of these issues.
Perfect. Thank you, Whitney. I didn't mean to jump on too soon. I was thinking you were wrapping up. One of the things that's actually so it's a wonderful thing to be thinking about, right? Is like, how can we help with those pregnancies being successful, but also thinking about, anyway, it's an area I know we have a lot to learn on, and but it's an exciting area to be thinking about. I want to flip a little bit over to actually lung transplant. And the two questions that came up, one of these was just, we're 5 years in now with Trikafta, sort of what's the effect been on transplant in general? And then the other is, can people who have lung transplant benefit from these new medicines? How often is that something that that can be helpful for somebody who's already had a transplant?
Right. So we know that, as Dr. Farrow mentioned earlier, some of the main things clinical outcomes we're concerned about when we look at these medicines is one primary one is improvement in lung function. So of course, after a lung transplant, there's no longer CF in the lung. So taking these modulators, we don't really think of them as improving or impacting the new lungs because they don't have CF. But there are some other benefits, such as improvement in sinus disease, improvement in weight or GI symptoms that may be potentially beneficial for individuals with CF, even when they have new lungs. So it's a case by case. Again, this is not an FDA approved this is not a group that was included in the initial clinical trials, but case by case, there are some individuals living with a lung transplant who have gone on modulators, primarily again for looking for benefits outside of the lungs, such as sinus, weight, GI symptoms, et cetera. So, we anticipate that Alyftrek would be thought of, whether or not to go on that would be, again, I'm thinking along the same lines as other modulators. I may have forgotten the second part of the question, Mike.
No, I think you covered. I think part of it was also just the effects of. I mean, one of the things that the real benefits in general of Trikafta is that the number of transplants have come down so much, right?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Dramatically, yeah. So, but thank you, Whitney. Thanks for that, both on the pregnancy side and on the transplant side. And I might actually just take one of the next ones I saw here, just because I happened to be in clinic earlier this week and was dealing with and maybe Whitney, if you want to comment on this as well, but the question was about is insurance covering Alyftrek? And so I would just say it's early days right now. That obviously this was just approved, and most insurance companies right now are sort of assessing the drug. Most formulators don't have them on there. So I would say there's a little bit of patience right now, and that likely every insurance company is going to have their own approach. So this is one where it's really important to talk with your caregiver. Number one, to say, hey, do I feel like this is the right thing for me? But then also to understand sort of for your own insurance how this all fits together. And some of this may require some extra paperwork, we're going to have to learn some together here, because I think insurance companies right now are looking at this to decide. I don't know, Whitney, if you want to add anything else to that you've seen in your own clinic.
No, I think it starts with the initial conversations with the care team about whether a switch is right for an individual patient based on their experience, how well they've done, or how if there's been side effects or liver issues with Trikafta. And I think so initially trying to make that decision. But again, I totally agree that we are this is all new territory. In fact, in our Epic electronic medical record last week in clinic, there's still not an order to put in for Alyftrek. So it is really early days, and so we're having to actually, call in those prescriptions, et cetera. And the point being that the processes are just being stood up. And so I think we just need to have patience. Step one is to decide if a change is potentially right for you with your care team. And then number two is just to know that it won't be overnight. But the care teams will continue to work as they always do to get the right therapy.
Dr. Brown, thank you.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that I'm excited about, though, is just this idea of wanting to be able to have some alternatives, right? For people who maybe haven't been able to tolerate, want to try something new. It's nice to have some other alternatives, and we want to continue to move towards that. I wanted to actually ask Dr. Steve Rowe to come back on one more time. Steve, if you could, there's a couple questions. I think one of the questions I thought was an interesting one was, seems like there's lots of mutations now that are being covered by these new modulators. What's left? How many people aren't being treated? Are there still lots of mutations that aren't going to benefit from this? And sort of, and maybe, I think there was one specific question about, class 1 mutations, what were those? And obviously you've covered a lot of that, but can you talk a little bit about the group that's not eligible, how big it is, and maybe a few more details about that group? It looks like you might be on mute. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Got turned back on. You're asking a really good question, Mike. The good news is more and more mutations have appeared on the label. I think you summarized at the beginning. The grand total is 433 mutations that we can see that 430 people with CF that are newly eligible for CFTR modulators that are recorded in our registry, and of course it'll grow from there and grow into as we expand other countries that have become available, et cetera. That's just what we know about in the U.S. registry. So that's a really good news. And the other piece is it's about 94-ish% of people with CF now that have a CFTR modulator approved. So we've pushed that down. We used to call it the 7% that are left out. Now we think that's down to about 6%. Even though there's hundreds of new mutations, and we talked about the number of people that are affected, one of the challenges with CF is the mutations that really are not on the label either are for a good reason, they're not going to be fixed by the CFTR modulator. So they'll never will be, no matter how much testing is done. And then secondly, there's a group of mutations, but it's far, far fewer people. It's probably less than 1% of people with CF now, for which we might imagine that they work, but they simply just haven't been tested yet. Of course, we're going to still work on that group, and we're thinking about approaches where you could go see your doctor, get a test case of a CFTR modulator, and then see if it works. This is a future state that we're hoping to try and build towards, so that we don't leave anyone behind that can benefit from CFTR modulator therapy. So that's kind of the current standing. Steady progress, but the lion's share of people that don't benefit now are in the group of people that the mutations really just aren't going to be fixed by the current active CFTR modulators. So what are we going to do about that? Well, one is there's more modulators in development. Both Vertex and one of our other CFF partners, Sionna, are developing a new class of CFTR modulator therapy. And in these a new class of agents, we think that additional mutations might ultimately be available, and we think they're going to work better, even better than the current modulators, even those like vanzacaftor that was just approved. So that's one way we're going to address it. But the lion's share, the most important cause is what we talked about from the very beginning. We talked about the genetic type therapies that will work regardless of mutations. And so that's why we're spending so much time thinking about mRNA, gene addition, and ultimately gene editing type approaches, both delivering a cure and helping people without benefit from CFTR modulator therapy.
So Steve, thank you. That's perfect. I think we're going to actually, I can't believe that the hour is already up on this. We've zipped through so much. So I think we're going to maybe wrap up the question. I'm going to take one last one, and we're going to go ahead and wrap for the night. And I'm number one, I just want to say thank you for everybody who's able to join us. We absolutely are keeping track of these questions. So we're going to try to weave any question that we didn't address into future communications as well. One of the ones that I thought was a good one to end on was a question that said, you've talked about the 3 C's. And then why is community so important? As we have cure and care, but why is the community so important to the mission? And what I would say is the community drives those first 2. That's you all, we view you as partners in this. And there's lots of ways to think about that. So sometimes it's practical ways. Doing clinical trials. We've talked about all this progress. It only happens with clinical trials. So participating in clinical trials, if you've done that, if a loved one's done that, if you're thinking about it, just going to say thank you. That drives that. We heard about advocacy tonight, another way of partnering with you to make sure that our voices are heard, right? And that we continue to prioritize the needs of people with CF and their families. And another one is fundraising. Irena talked about this earlier. We're going to spend $2 billion through the end of 2030 on research and care. We need your help. And so fundraising, another reason the community is so important. We want to continue to be aggressive on this. And then the biggest thing I would just say is at the end of the day, you inspire us. There's no greater privilege than being able to serve you with CF or your loved one with CF. And so we view you as partners in this. We've got lots of work ahead. We're proud of what we've accomplished, but we know we have more to do. So we look forward to continue this conversation. 2025 is going to be a big year. You've heard just some of those things, everything from science results to going in care, and obviously lots of advocacy and lots of fundraising, lots of community interaction. So thank you. Good night. Looking forward to continuing to partner you as we go ahead into the rest of the year.